You're listening to Radio Maria, a Christian voice in your home. We now present our program, Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism, with Roy Showman.
Hi, this is Roy Showman. Welcome again to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism, the show on Radio Maria that celebrates the Jewish roots of the Catholic Church, or seen the other way around, that celebrates the fulfillment, the full realization of all of the promise of Judaism in the Catholic Church and her sacraments. Well, today, first of all, before I start the real topic for today's show, I just want to acknowledge that today is a first Saturday, so it may be a little bit late to go to Mass and receive communion today, respecting the Blessed Virgin Mary's wishes at Fatima for the first Saturday devotion, but it's certainly not too late to say a rosary and to spend 15 minutes meditating on the mysteries of Mary in the rosary. So it's always a little sad to let a first Saturday go by without honoring our Blessed Mother properly, which gets us perhaps to the topic of today's show, because one of the reparations that was to be made through the first Saturday devotion was in fact all of the offenses against purity. And I doubt that I'm sure there's never been a time after the advent of Christianity where purity has been offended against as much as it is today. And that brings us to today's show, which is going to be on Our Lady of Good Success, which was a series of apparitions of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Quito, Ecuador, in a very early time, 1610 until, I believe, 1634, so the very beginning of the 17th century. And what's particularly interesting about these apparitions, first of all, they've certainly stood the test of time, but the Blessed Virgin Mary gave a series of prophecies, and some of those prophecies were very specifically about our time today. That is, a set of the prophecies foretold what was going to begin to happen in the latter half of the 20th century. Of course, that would be about the middle of the 1900s and going up until today. And you'll see when we get to the body of those prophecies, first of all, how true they turned out to be, and second of all, that they do really give us a great deal of hope for the triumph of her Immaculate Heart, because the prophecies foretell pretty much what we're seeing today in terms of how bad things get, but she also says essentially when things look so bad that it looks like there's no possible recovery or hope, that's when she will intervene. So, before I butcher the prophecies anymore, God forbid I should not do justice to the Blessed Virgin Mary's words when she deigns to honor us with an apparition and with a prophecy for our day, I will simply go to the story of Our Lady of Good Success in Quito, Ecuador, and most particularly to some of her prophecies. First of all, I'll read a short introduction, and then I will go to the prophecies. The apparitions of the Blessed Virgin Mary occurred at a newly founded convent in Quito, not surprisingly called the Convent of the Immaculate Conception. So here goes. The Convent of the Immaculate Conception was the first convent of religious sisters in the city of Quito, Ecuador. The Catholic nobility of the city petitioned King Philip II for this favor so that the women of the colony might enjoy the benefits of the religious life. So 5 professed sisters of the order, that's of course the Order of the Immaculate Conception, were sent from Spain as the founding mothers of the new convent. Now I will simply interject something. They found that all 5 bodies of those founding sisters were incorrupt when they uncovered them within the last 30 or 40 years. They were incorrupt for those 400 years. Anyway, 5 professed sisters of the order were sent from Spain as founding mothers of the new convent. They were accompanied by a 13-year-old girl, Mariana de Jesus Torres, the niece of the Mother Superior. She was to become the most well-known of the founding mothers. The convent was formally founded on January 13th, 1577. The young novice made rapid advancement in the spiritual life and enjoyed many favors from heaven. She also practiced severe penances and was chosen by God to suffer as a victim soul. Many of her sufferings were occasioned by those of her sisters in religion who were lax and who rebelled against the austere way of life insisted upon by Blessed Beatrice and the Spanish founding mothers, and were required by the holy rule of the community. Eventually, Mother Mariana was chosen to be abbess in place of her ailing aunt, who died soon after. Now is not the place for it, but this Mother Mariana was most extraordinary from when she was a small child. Her story sounds a little bit like Padre Pio. If you remember, Padre Pio used to be visited by his guardian angel when he was a little boy and, speak to his guardian angel and see him and so forth. And Mother Mariana had a most extraordinary childhood, which led her to enter religious life. I don't know if it was at the age of 13 or before the age of 13, but by the age of 13, she was a member of this community. Anyway, the first apparition of Our Lady of Good Success. Very early on the morning of February 2nd, 1594, Mother Mariana was praying in the upper choir of the convent, fervently beseeching Jesus and Mary for relief from the many severe trials the convent was undergoing, and that many sins would be prevented. During her long prayer, she heard a sweet voice call her name. Rising quickly, she saw the Blessed Virgin Mary holding the child Jesus in her left arm. Once she was asked who she was, Our Lady replied, "I am Mary of Good Success, the Queen of Heaven and Earth. As his mother, I carry the child Jesus here in my left arm, so that together we might restrain the hand of divine justice, which is always so ready to chastise this unfortunate and criminal world. In my right hand I carry the crozier that you see, for I desire to govern this convent as abbess and mother. Satan will begin to try to destroy this work of God, but he will not succeed, because I am the Queen of Victories and the Mother of Good Success, and it is under this invocation I desire to be known throughout all time." The Most Holy Virgin Mary placed the child Jesus in the arms of Mother Mariana, giving her a strong desire to suffer as a victim soul. Our Lady appeared many more times to Mother Mariana. During the apparition of January 16, 1599, Our Lady asked Madre Mariana to have a statue made depicting her just as she appeared to the holy religious. She then bade her to measure her height with the cord of her religious habit. Our Lady promised, quote, "When tribulations of spirit and sufferings of body oppress them, and they seem to be drowning in a bottomless sea, let them gaze at my holy image, which will be for them a star for the shipwrecked. I will always be there, ready to listen to their lamentations and calm their weeping. Tell them that they should always have recourse to their mother with faith and love." So that's a very brief account of the story of the miraculous statue. It turns out, this is a little bit off the script that I'm reading from, but Mother Mariana had that statue made, but before the sculptor finished the statue, when he was almost finished with the statue, he went to the workroom, the next morning to finish the statue, and it had already been finished. And later, Mother Mariana was told that it was finished by the angels, and it is considered a miraculous statue for that reason, as well as for all of the graces that flowed from it, and also, in fact, because when the statue was finished, and I believe Mother Mariana saw it for the first time, the Blessed Virgin Mary animated the statue. In other words, the statue came to life. So, however, let me get on to the prophecies themselves. By the way, this is a live call-in program, and the number here is 866-333-6279, which spells out M-A-R-Y for Mary. So it's 866-333-MARY, M-A-R-Y. Or if you're on, if you use Skype, the number here is Radio Maria USA Studio. And if you call in or Skype in, I will interrupt momentarily the reading and take your questions or comments. And also, about halfway through the show, in about 15 minutes, I will take a short musical break, and you might wish to call in during that break, in which case I will take the calls coming out of the break. Anyway, jumping ahead to the warnings about the 20th century. Early in the morning of January 21st, 1610, Mother Mariana was favored by an apparition of the archangels St. Michael, St. Gabriel, and St. Raphael. Then Our Lady appeared and related many predictions. Here they go, quote, "Thus I make it known to you that from the end of the 19th century and shortly after the middle of the 20th century, the passions will erupt and there will be a total corruption of morals, for Satan will reign almost completely by means of the Masonic sects. They will focus principally on the children in order to sustain this general corruption. Woe to the children of these times! It will be difficult to receive the sacrament of baptism and also that of confirmation. Often during this epoch, the enemies of Jesus Christ, instigated by the devil, will steal consecrated hosts from the churches so that they might profane the Eucharistic species. As for the sacrament of matrimony, it will be attacked and deeply profaned. The Catholic spirit will rapidly decay. The precious light of the faith will gradually be extinguished. Added to this will be the effects of secular education, which will be one reason for the scarcity of priestly and religious vocations. The sacrament of holy orders will be ridiculed, oppressed, and despised. The devil will try to persecute the ministers of the Lord in every possible way. He will labor with cruel and subtle astuteness to turn them away from the spirit of their vocation, and he will corrupt many of them. These depraved priests, who will scandalize the Christian people, will make the hatred of bad Catholics and the enemies of the Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church fall upon all priests. Further, in these unhappy times, there will be unbridled luxury, which will ensnare the rest into sin and conquer innumerable frivolous souls who will be lost. Innocence will almost no longer be found in children, nor modesty in women. In this supreme moment of the need of the Church, the one who should speak will fall silent." I could spend the rest of the show just unpacking this, 3 or 4 sentences. Okay? I don't want to spend the rest of the show doing it, but I cannot refrain from at least doing some of it. It seems like an amazingly acute prediction of what the world would look like at the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. The passions will erupt and there will be a total corruption of morals, for Satan will reign almost completely. They will focus principally on the children in order to sustain this general corruption. Woe to us. I don't want to get too specific, but when one thinks of the corruption of children in our age, what is imposed on them in secular education, the, God forbid, sex education, which is introduced, to 6 and 7-year-olds, the introduction of knowledge about human sexuality, which frankly, one could almost argue should certainly wait for adolescence, the imposition of instruction and knowledge about the worst deviations of normal sexuality, the transvestite storybook hours in public libraries, the invitation to children as young as 7 or 8 to question whether they are of the right gender or they should begin to change genders. I could go on and on and on. I'm going to stop there. Perhaps I went too far, but it's quite an exercise to hold up against this prophecy what we're seeing today. I shall continue. I'll move away from the corruption of children, but between you and me, I believe the corruption of children is what is bringing on all of the chastisement that we are seeing today, and that, God forbid, we're about to see much worse. Continuing. As for the sacrament of matrimony, it will be attacked and deeply profaned. How much worse could it be profaned than to institute the sacrament of matrimony for two people of the same gender? The Catholic spirit will rapidly decay. We all know what the statistics are. The small percentage of Catholics who believe in the real presence, and the tiny percentage of Catholics who go to Mass on Sundays in once Catholic countries like France or Belgium. That percentage is probably well under 10%. The precious light of the faith will gradually be extinguished. There will be a scarcity of priestly and religious vocations. The sacraments of holy orders will be ridiculed, oppressed, and despised. How many of us know priests who don't dare wear their clerical clothes when they go out in public because of the amount of contempt and insults they get? Seriously. Anyway, tragic. The devil will try to persecute the ministers of the Lord in every possible way, and he will corrupt many of them. This we know all too well. It has in fact happened. And then these depraved priests will scandalize the Christian people and make the hatred of bad Catholics, notice, fall upon all priests. How many of us know people, Catholics, who use the excuse of the scandals within the church to explain why they no longer practice as Catholics, why they no longer go to Mass? Further, in these unhappy times, there will be unbridled luxury, which will ensnare the rest into sin and conquer innumerable frivolous souls. Can I mention Netflix? Can I mention what you can call up on your smartphone or on your TV at the drop of a hat? As a matter of fact, never mind what you call up on purpose. Simply the normal broadcast television shows during prime time are worse than near occasions of sin. I think they are occasions of sin. Innocence will almost no longer be found in children, nor modesty in women. Whether one goes to the beach and sees bathing suits which are barely worth the trouble to be wearing, or whether one walks through the streets of a city like New York and sees even elderly ladies dressed in extremely immodest clothing, I think this has been fulfilled. In the supreme moment of need of the church, the one who should speak will fall silent. The one who should speak will fall silent. Now, presumably, in a moment of supreme need in the church, the one who should speak, above and beyond all others, one would imagine would be the vicar of Christ. Anyway, continuing with the prophecies. The apparition, early on the morning of February 2nd, 1610, Our Lady appeared again to Mother Mariana. Notice, by the way, that the date of these apparitions in the last two cases was February 2nd, which is the feast of the presentation and of the purification of the Virgin. It's the day, 40 days after the birth of Christ, when the infant Jesus was presented in the temple, and also when the Blessed Virgin Mary presented herself in the temple for the ritual purification subsequent to childbirth. Anyway, Our Lady appeared again to Mother Mariana and repeated her command to have a statue made. She then added, this is details about Well, no, I'll just read this. Tell the bishop that it is my will and the will of my most holy Son that your name be hidden at all costs. It is not fitting for anyone at the present time to know the details or origin of how this statue came to be made, for this knowledge will only become known to the general public in the 20th century. That also was correctly fulfilled. For this knowledge will only, during that epoch, the Church will find herself attacked by terrible hordes of the Masonic sect, and the land will be agonizing because of the corruption of morals, unbridled luxury, the impious press, and secular education. The vices of impurity, blasphemy, and sacrilege will dominate in this time of depraved desolation, and that one who should speak out will be silent. We talked about that. Then the statue was finished by angels, as I mentioned. The sculptor of the statue of Our Lady of Good Success was actually named for this work by Our Lady herself. Nevertheless, the work was predicted to be completed by the angels. Mother Mariana witnessed this prodigy early in the morning of January 16, 1611. She saw in vision the Most Holy Trinity, the Most Holy Virgin Mary, the 9 choirs of angels, and in particular, the archangels St. Michael, St. Gabriel, and St. Raphael, together with St. Francis. These last 4 approached the statue and finished the work which the sculptor had intended to finish that very day. Then Mother Mariana saw Our Lady enter into and animate the statue. All of these facts were attested by Mother Mariana to the bishop before he solemnly consecrated and installed the statue. The sculptor, too, testified that he had not finished the statue and that it must be the work of angels. Then we'll switch back to the, to the prophecies themselves. The most important of the apparitions of Our Lady of Good Success took place near the end of Mother Mariana's life. The early morning of February 2nd, 1634, note again the Feast of the Presentation and of the Purification, found Mother Mariana praying before the Blessed Sacrament, beseeching him that she might be united with him and be engulfed in that love which belongs to the Blessed. She also reminded him to protect and preserve his daughters in this beloved convent. As she finished his prayer, she saw the sanctuary light extinguish itself, leaving the altar completely dark. Our Lady appeared to tell her that our Lord had heard her clamors and would end her earthly exile in less than a year. Prepare your souls so that increasingly purified it might enter into the fullness of the joy of our Lord. These are the words of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Oh, if mortals, and in particular religious souls, could know what heaven is and what it is to possess God, how differently they would live, nor would they spare themselves any sacrifice in order to possess him. The Blessed Virgin Mary then explained the 5 meanings of the tabernacle light that had been distinguished before Mother Mariana's eyes. In other words, the Blessed Virgin Mary explained the meaning behind the fact that the tabernacle light had been extinguished, and there were 5 meanings to it. The first meaning is that at the end of the 19th century and into the 20th century, various heresies will be propagated. As these heresies spread and dominate, the precious light of faith will be extinguished in souls by the almost total corruption of morals. During this period, there will be great physical and moral calamities, both public and private. The small number of souls who, hidden, will preserve the treasure of faith and the virtues, will suffer an unspeakably cruel and prolonged martyrdom. In order to free men from bondage to these heresies, those whom the merciful love of my most holy Son will destine for that restoration will need great strength of will, constancy, courage, and much confidence in God. To test this faith and confidence of the just, there will be occasions when everything will seem to be lost and paralyzed. This, then, will be the happy beginning of the complete restoration. These chosen souls, that's the end of the quote. These chosen souls who will restore the health of the Church are described in detail as the apostles of the latter times by Saint Louis de Montfort in his True Devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. So again, we see in this prophecy that things will get darker and darker, and it will seem that everything will be lost and paralyzed, and that will be the beginning of the restoration. We've come to about the halfway point in the show, so I am going to take the short musical break. And you've been listening to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism on Radio Maria with me, your host, Roy Shulman. And I have been reading an account of, first of all, of the apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary to Mother Miriam in Quito, Ecuador, in the beginning of the 17th century, and more particularly reading her prophecies that have to do with what the world will look like in the middle of the 20th century. And so that's where we are now. So with that, let me go to that break and play a short musical selection. And if you wish to call in during the break with a question or comment, the number here is 866-333-6279 or 866-333-MARY, M-A-R-Y, or Skype Radio Maria USA Studio. Back in a few moments.
Tota pulcra es Maria, tota pulcra es Maria, et macula originalis, non est in te. Et macula originalis, non est in te. Tu gloria Jerusalem, tu laetitia Israel, tu honorificentia populi nostri, tu advocata peccatorum. O Maria, Virgo prudentissima, Mater clementissima, ora pro nobis, intercede pro nobis, ad Dominum Iesum Christum.
Well, I'm back. I hope you enjoyed that. That's the musical group sing that is called Harpa Dei, H-A-R-P-A, new word D-E-I, the Harp of God. And if you like that kind of music, you can just look for them on YouTube, and they have dozens and dozens and dozens of very beautiful hymns sung in that style. Now, I don't see any calls at the moment, so I will return to the prophecies from Our Lady of Good Success in Quito, Ecuador, in the first half of the 17th century. And I took the break at the point where the Blessed Virgin Mary is explaining the 5 great offenses which caused the tabernacle light to go out. And we've come to the second meaning. But before I do that, again, the number here is 866-333-6279 or 866-333-MARY, M-A-R-Y, if you wish to call. The second meaning, Our Lady said, is that my convent will be submerged in a fathomless ocean of indescribable bitterness and will seem to be drowning in these waters of tribulations. Injustice would enter even this convent, disguised under the name of false charity, wreaking havoc in souls. Now, I want to stop and mention that, because false charity, if you look around at the world and try to identify probably the greatest weakness being expressed within the Catholic Church, one could argue that it might be false charity. We don't want to be unkind to anybody. We don't want to make anyone feel rejected. We don't want to make anyone lose their self-esteem. So we forget the great spiritual act of mercy of reproving the sinner. Right? I mean, I hate to say it, but let's take the situation of, say, a couple who are in mortal sin. Now, they're not in mortal sin because you or I or their parish priest is condemning them. They're in mortal sin in the eyes of God. They should get out of mortal sin as soon as possible if they want to make it to heaven, and should they die in the immediate future, it's particularly important that they get out of mortal sin immediately. But if the sinner is not reproved, in other words, if nobody says anything to them, or even worse, if people go out of their way to approve their actions, even though those actions are mortally sinful, then in fact it is exactly what the Blessed Virgin Mary is talking about here, which is wreaking havoc in souls under the name of false charity. Under the name of false charity. If you approve of unions that are clearly mortal sin in the teaching of the Church, and therefore in the eyes of God, if you approve of them, and if you don't reprove them, then you are wreaking havoc in souls under the name of false charity, as the Blessed Virgin Mary said. And the ultimate wreaking havoc of souls, of course, is if the soul is lost and ends up in hell. As a matter of fact, talk about false charity, not talking about hell itself, is wreaking havoc in souls under the guise of false charity, right? Because you don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. I never know how much is prudent and how much is imprudent, but let me just say, how frequently do you hear hell mentioned, even in homilies, even in the sermon, even in preaching? Thank God for priests who do mention it, but it's not unknown for priests who mention it in a homily in a parish to be called on the carpet for having dared scare some people, called on the carpet of the chancery even, for having dared scare people by mentioning the possibility of hell. Anyway, continuing with the Blessed Virgin Mary. You're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to her. Continuing, the third thing that caused the tabernacle light to go out, the third reason the lamp was extinguished is because of the spirit of impurity that will saturate the atmosphere in those times. Like a filthy ocean, it will run through the streets, squares, and public places with an astonishing liberty. There will be almost no virgin souls in the world, Our Lady told her. The delicate flower of virginity would be threatened by complete annihilation. However, she promised that there would always be some good souls in cloisters where it might take root, grow, and live like a shield to deflect divine wrath. Quote, without virginity, the Blessed Virgin Mary said, it would be necessary for fire from heaven to fall upon these lands to purify them. I know this isn't what the Blessed Virgin Mary was specifically referring to, but when she says the spirit of impurity, like a filthy ocean, will run through the streets, squares, and public places with an astonishing liberty, I have seen you don't call them billboards, but advertisements that spread the entire length of a city bus. I've seen this in a number of cities, which are pornographic. There is that 35-foot bus going down the street during rush hour with a 8-foot by 30-foot pornographic image, whether it's advertising undergarments or whether it's for a movie showing a couple in an improper embrace. Literally running through the streets like a filthy ocean. Anyway, continuing. So that was the third reason the lamp was extinguished. The fourth reason for the lamp being quenched is that the Masonic sects would subtly introduce its teaching into domestic ambiances in order to corrupt the children, and the devil would glory in dining upon the exquisite delicacy of the hearts of children. During these unfortunate times, Our Lady foretold, evil will assault childhood innocence. In this way, vocations to the priesthood will be lost, which will be a true calamity. Again, the corruption of children, the corruption of innocence, being the most tragic aspect of our times, which Our Lady seems to have correctly foretold. During this time, Our Lady foretold the secular clergy will be far removed from its ideal, because the priests will become careless in their sacred duties. Lacking the divine compass, they will stray from the road traced by God for the priestly ministry, and they will become attached to wealth and riches, which they will unduly strive to obtain. How the Church will suffer on that occasion, the dark night of the lack of a prelate and father to watch over them with paternal love, gentleness, strength, discernment, and prudence. Many priests will lose their spirit, placing their souls in great danger. Therefore, pray insistently without tiring, and weep with bitter tears in the secrecy of your heart. Implore our Celestial Father that for the love of the Eucharistic heart of my most holy Son and his precious blood, shed with such generosity, he might take pity on his ministers and bring to an end those ominous times, and send to the Church the prelate who will restore the spirit of her priests. My most holy Son and I will love this favored Son with a love of predilection, and we will gift him with a rare capacity, humility of heart, docility to divine inspiration, the strength to defend the rights of the Church, and a tender and compassionate heart, so that, like another Christ, he will assist the great and small, without despising the more unfortunate souls who ask him for light and counsel in their doubts and hardships. Into his hands the scales of the sanctuary will be placed, so that everything is weighed with due measure, and God will be glorified. The lukewarmness of all the souls consecrated to God in the priestly and religious state will delay the coming of this prelate and father. This then will be the cause of the cursed devil taking possession of the land, where he will achieve his victories by means of a faithless people, so numerous that like a black cloud it will obscure the pure heavens consecrated to the Sacred Heart of my divine Son. With these people all the vices will enter, which will attract in their turn every type of chastisement, such as plagues, famines, internal fighting and external disputes with other nations, and apostasy, the cause of the perdition of so many souls so dear to Jesus Christ and to me. In order to dissipate this black cloud which prevents the Church from enjoying the clear day of liberty, there will be a formidable and frightful war, which will see the bloodshed of countrymen and foreigners, of secular and regular priests, and of religious. That night will be most horrible, for humanly speaking, evil will seem to triumph. This then will mark the arrival of my hour, when I, in a marvelous way, will dethrone the proud and cursed Satan, trampling him under my feet and fettering him in the infernal abyss. Thus Church and country will finally be free of his cruel tyranny. Well, this can't help but remind one, oh, I see I have a caller. Let me finish the sentence and then take the call. It can't help but remind one of Our Lady of Fatima saying, but in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. But with that, let's turn to the caller. Are you there, Joe?
Speaking. Hey, Roy, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, just a very quick question. I'm sure you heard that the Ukrainian bishops have asked Pope Francis to go ahead and consecrate once again, to consecrate Russia and Ukraine to the Most Immaculate Heart. And I wanted to know if you thought that that had been satisfied by John Paul II. I can't remember if it was 1984 or something that he presumably or allegedly had consecrated it, and I've always been kind of unclear on this.
You and me both.
But it seems like, if it had already been done by John Paul Second, why would they be requesting it again?
Okay.
I mean, that's it. That's all I wanted to ask.
Sure. I can outline the kind of the rough outline of the issue. I can't, make a judgment about which side of the issue is correct. Our Lady at Fatima, I believe, asked for the Pope, in union with all the bishops of the world, to consecrate Russia to her Immaculate Heart, I believe by name. So the people who question whether it's been done properly address the issue of whether the Pope did it in union with all the bishops of the world or simply did it kind of on his own, and the fact that he did not mention Russia by name, although I believe he made allusion to Russia. So that is the kind of territory of the dispute or the uncertainty. I believe that at one point, Sister Lucia was asked about it and said that the Blessed Virgin Mary had accepted the consecration. But as with many of these issues, there are people who argue both sides of the issue, that it was done and that it wasn't done, and I'm not in a position to make a judgment on, the merits of the two sides of the argument. I hope that helps.
Well, fair enough, Roy. Just thank you.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
that's right. But the thing is, I know what I don't know, so to speak, and I have to acknowledge what I don't know, and it's way above my pay grade to make a judgment on whether the Blessed Virgin Mary accepted the consecration as it was done or not. However, I will say that it wouldn't hurt to, like when a priest isn't sure whether somebody was validly baptized or not, right? He gets a conditional baptism that is a baptism if he hadn't been baptized and is not a baptism if he had already been baptized. So I don't see what harm would be done if the Pope, in union with all the bishops of the world, did a conditional consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart. Anyway, I would be all for that.
Very good.
Okay. Continuing with the prophecy. Thanks for the call, by the way. And, we don't have a quota of just one call, so if someone else wants to call in, please do. The number here is 866-333-6279 or 866-333-MARY, M-A-R-Y. But for the moment, continuing with the prophecy, the fifth reason that the lamp was extinguished is due to the laxity and the negligence of those who possess great wealth, who will indifferently stand by and watch the church being oppressed, virtue being persecuted, and the triumph of the devil, without piously employing their riches for the destruction of this evil and the restoration of the faith. And it is also due to the indifference of the people allowing the name of God to be gradually extinguished and adhering to the spirit of evil, freely delivering themselves over to vices and passions. Alas, my chosen daughter, if it were given to you to live in that tenebrious era, that dark era, you would die of sorrow to see all that I have revealed to you here take place. But my most holy Son and I have such a great love, our legacy, that we desire even now the application of your sacrifices and prayers to shorten the duration of such a terrible catastrophe. Overwhelmed by the magnitude of the evil she saw, and the countless souls that would be condemned during these times, Mother Mariana fell unconscious. There the sisters found her, as though dead, except for the violent beating of her heart. All of the doctor's efforts to restore her to consciousness proved useless. Okay, well, we don't know yet whether Mother Mariana will remain dead or not, but we do have another caller. So I'll turn to the call, and we will find out what happened to Mother Mariana in a few minutes. But for now, are you there, Gloria?
The countless souls that would be condemned during these times.
Why don't you turn down the radio?
And the sisters found her.
Hi, Roy.
Yes, turn off the radio or turn down the radio. Hello?
Okay, I
Okay,
did.
good. Did you have a comment or a question?
Is this Roy?
Yes, this is Roy.
Roy, okay. My husband and I have been watching this sad war. I just want to say that I've been thinking of your parents your mom and dad what they went through, and I was just wondering, do did you were you born then, or have you any recollections of how terrible war is? After seeing what's going on in Russia, that was one question I was going to ask you, and that we are, praying for anyone that had to die in a war or live through it. And that's all. We're just thinking of you and your family and all of the people that, died during that time.
Well, thank you very much, Gloria. That's a very, very sweet sentiment. The answer to your question is that I was born just after the war, shortly after the war, and my parents were, of course, involved more directly, and my mother was hit by it much worse. My father had actually left Germany before the Holocaust itself began, before the extermination of the Jews began. He actually fought in the U.S. Army. That's a story in itself, but he actually was involved in the top secret project of planning the Normandy invasion. He was in intelligence at the time in the U.S. Army. But my mother was caught up by the Nazis, and she never recovered. I can say that. The suffering and the fear and the seeing the monstrous behavior of people. I'll tell you the truth. The reason she never recovered is because she could never forgive herself for having survived when all these other people didn't. But anyway, so yes, it's absolutely terrible, and it's needless to say terrible for the victims, and it's even terrible for the survivors, the people who escaped. I grew up, of course, very Jewish, and my parents were German Jewish, so I grew up in a world where many, many people were in fact Holocaust survivors, and I can say that none of them were entirely, recovered from the experience. That's for sure. So yes, absolutely, it's the worst thing imaginable.
What, Roy?
Excuse me?
Spell that. I'm not hearing is bad.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I can't control the volume that goes out through the radio and stuff. But anyway,
I just couldn't think of what word you were using there. And the other thing, I guess, I just cannot understand why. Well, I don't want anyone dead, but I can't understand why we're not doing more towards Putin. And I know it's a very touchy subject.
Okay.
But I know, war is war, and I'm 82. But I'm just so sorry we have to go through that. And if we were to want to help people like that, the wondering little young woman mothers, how do we get in touch? We just wait until.
Let me try to answer your question, but then I'm going to have to go back to the show.
Yeah.
I do not know offhand how to help them. I do know that the diocese that I'm in, the bishop had a collection. Actually, on Ash Wednesday, the collection was to go to help those who were suffering due to the war in the Ukraine. So I am sure that the USCCB, that the Bishops of the United States organization, probably does have some fundraising campaign going to do just that. And as to the United States entering the war, it is absolutely terrible, of course, needless to say, the destruction and the mayhem and the suffering that's going on in Ukraine. But, compare that to a world war between two nuclear powers, and you are going to have thousands of times more mayhem and murder and destruction. So I am certainly in favor. I'm against all war, but I'm also against a war expanding from being a local war to being a global war, and expanding from being a conventional war to being a nuclear war. So I'm not sure I'm in entire agreement with you on wishing that the United States would get involved. And finally, the most important thing to remember what the Blessed Virgin Mary said at Fatima: war is a punishment for sin. The fundamental problem is not the war in the Ukraine. The fundamental problem is the sin in the world, which is producing chastisements like this. Anyway.
That's right.
That's right.
And that came from the pulpit a while ago. You were saying, I don't remember what you said, but we heard that from our pulpit from an old Irish priest.
Good. I think I was channeling him there.
For Russia.
But I'm in the last 2 minutes of the show now, so I'm going to have to say goodbye to you and wrap up. But thank you very much for your call, Gloria.
You're wonderful. Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, so she looked dead. In fact, humanly speaking, her life should have ended from the shock she received. Her back to Mother Mariana back in 1634 or so. Her sisters surrounded her, beseeching heaven to leave them their great treasure. And 2 days later, Mother Mariana opened her eyes, encouraged her sisters to continue to follow the rule, and consoled them that she would remain with them yet a little longer. Anyway, then finally, there was one final apparition of Our Lady of Good Success to Mother Mariana, December 8th, 1834, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. And Our Lady said, "In the 20th century, this devotion to Our Lady of Good Success will work prodigies in the spiritual as well as temporal spheres, because it is the will of God to reserve this invocation and knowledge of your life for that century," that's the life of Mother Mariana, "when the corruption of morals will be almost general and the precious light of faith all but distinguished." Mother Mariana died a most holy death at 3 p.m., the hour of mercy, of course, the hour that Jesus died, on January 16th, 1635, just as she had foretold. So that is, in a nutshell, the story of Our Lady of Good Success and the prophecies from the Blessed Virgin Mary. And if you're interested in more, it's easy to find on the internet. Just look for Our Lady of Good Success. You can find the prophecies are much more extensive than what I read. They're probably a good 50 pages. And also to see pictures of the statue of Our Lady of Good Success, which was finished by the angels and animated by the Blessed Virgin Mary and so forth. So we're very, very blessed. Look, we're blessed to have everything normal that we have in the Catholic Church, like the teaching and like the worship and so forth. But we're additionally blessed by having these miracles, these special manifestations of heaven to lead us on the right path, to encourage us, to confirm our faith, and to show God's love for us, to show the protective, motherly love of the Blessed Virgin Mary for us, to show how Jesus loved us to the very last drop of his blood, and so forth. So we may be concerned with the state of the world, but let us be exploding inside with joy at what God has offered us, what God is giving us now, and even more importantly, what God has in store for us if we play our cards right. And with that, I will go back to that beautiful chant. By the way, I didn't mention it, but that chant is the hymn, Toda Pulchra es Maria. Totally beautiful is the Blessed Virgin Mary. So what better way to go out? You've been listening to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism on Radio Maria with me, your host, Roy Schoeman. And it's time to say bye for now, and I hope you join us again next week, same place, same time. Bye for now.
Tota pulchra es Maria, tota pulchra es Maria, et macula originalis non est in te, et macula originalis non est in te, tu gloria Jerusalem, tu laetitia Israel, tu honorificentia populi nostri, tu advocata peccatorem. O Maria, Virgo